You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Omlor, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Omlor International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Hello and welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Today we have Regina DeAngelis as a wonderful guest. After 26 years in the divorce world as an attorney, coach, and mediator, and overcoming her own difficult divorce, Regina created a proprietary divorce process that gives couples the supports, guidance, and education needed to avoid courts and lawyers completely if they choose. Well, this is intriguing, Regina. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Not at all. Not at all. I'm excited to hear about this because who wouldn't want to avoid all that if one were having to get a divorce?
Right.
So tell us, what got you to this coaching, mediating, and this service that you provide?
So obviously, right. So I'm a divorce attorney by trade. And when I think back to getting into of all the kinds of law you could choose, why did you do that? It really was because I thought I could help people and wanted to be part of the solution as families were struggling. But what anyone who has been through the process themselves knows is that it's super toxic from the very first second. And I learned that I could tell how a divorce was going to go by who my client told me was representing the other side. And so much of why divorce in this country is so ugly is because the lawyers are operating out of this old paradigm of it's literally we're suing your spouse. And so I felt really not good about myself as time went on, doing this for almost 20 years. I just couldn't live with it anymore. And I was going through, my own marriage was disintegrating. I have a son with a condition called Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and that physically causes him to deteriorate. And so I was dealing with all of this sort of negativity at home, and I knew I had to be something different. I had to show up in the world as something different. And so I created Family Transitions to really help couples do divorce a totally different way.
Wow. Okay, you were dealing with so much, and I can understand. This is your job, and your heart's not in it, and it's this is broken, and it is broken because it really is about the two attorneys churning as many hours as they possibly can, and sometimes they'd even meet in private. I found out
Exactly.
let's see how far we can take this. So really not a good. I'm not obviously all divorce attorneys don't do that. Obviously, there's some good ones that are ethical. Let's just put that in. So you thought, okay, I need to do this differently. I need to do this cleaner. Was that what you were thinking?
Yes.
Right.
And by cleaning it up, you can make it so much more efficient also. So the process that I created, if you think of the lawyers as literally as the middlemen, and there's three middlemen usually, because you've got the two lawyers plus often the court, right? So you've got to coordinate those three schedules plus the husband and wife, the spouses. And so by just eliminating that one piece of the puzzle, I can make this process incredibly less expensive and incredibly more time efficient.
Mm-hmm.
So it, in fact, isn't that hard to clean up once couples realize that it's okay. So many people believe oh, I have to have a lawyer. You can't do that without a lawyer. And in fact, you absolutely can. And there's no rule anywhere that says you need to have a lawyer.
Right. Well, you are a lawyer, so you can guide them through what normally you would have done and what you don't have to do now.
Exactly. And so I was kind of uniquely situated to be able to say, hey, after 18 years, I can tell you, and even right now, for anyone listening, if you're getting divorced, the presumption is it's going to be between 50-50 and 60-40 on the assets. I mean, obviously there's rare cases where it might be something different, but I would help tell a couple that, like, this
Hmm.
might be falling outside. But so every family in the United States, off the bat, I can limit them. You're fighting about 10% of the total assets.
Mm,
Um, but because I have that expertise and that background, it comes with credibility when I tell people that.
mm,
And they kind of relax. They trust the process. I give them all sorts of education materials. So it's a level playing field the whole time.
hmm.
I'm not telling just one of them it's going to be between 60-40 and 50-50.
Right. No, it's true though. That range it's more or less going to be the same range, and
Yes.
not worth all of that horrible feeling of having to go to court and all of that
Yes.
processing and figuring out times and all of that. Okay. So, what have you found when you tell people this? Are there certain types of people that say, no, I just want to go to court?
There's people that assume that their spouse is going to say, no, I just want to go to court.
Mm,
And that's what's been really cool as I've started this business. The business has been around since 2018.
mm,
And so it's taken me, I've proof of concept hundreds of couples now
mm,
where I know I can tell them for sure, like I call it the reluctant spouse. Like your spouse is going to be doing everything they can to try and calm you down. You've said you want a divorce. They're going to pretend like you said nothing, and they're hoping you're going to slide back into status quo, or they're going to threaten, X, Y, and Z when you tell
mhm,
them you want a divorce. And I know for sure that most people, in fact, are relieved when they talk to me because even though they might threaten it, they don't want that.
mm,
And even if they don't want it because of emotional reasons, usually the financial savings,
mhm.
that reluctant spouse calms down and is willing to go through this process when they realize how much money they're saving.
Time and money,
Time
because
and money,
yeah,
yes.
because apparently you're doing this in 6 months usually.
It takes about 6 months. And again, it's so cool that now I've done this so many times, I can really accurately say, like,
Mhm,
if you do the program and the steps as I guide you through,
mhm,
and we sit down for our one on one about every 3 weeks, it's going to take you 6 months or so,
mm,
so maybe a little bit faster, sometimes a little bit longer. Um, but again, it's really up to the couple if I've had cases where people lost jobs in the middle, somebody's mother passed away, right? Obviously, we can be super responsive to the actual needs of the family.
mhm,
But if they want to move slow and steady, they can really be transitioning into two households within 6 months, sometimes sooner if they
mm.
want to.
Right, and one thing is for sure, lawyers and courts and judges are not going to have that kind of consideration for anybody because they just can't.
Yeah, right. They just
They
can't.
just
That's
can't.
exactly
It's
right.
not that they're mean, they just can't. Okay, so what are some stories that you've had in all of this? What are some extraordinary stories you've had of couples and things that have happened?
I mean, oh my gosh, there's what I've learned is that there's nothing that you see on TV that does not happen in real life. I mean, I don't want to sound in any way like gossipy, right?
Mhm,
But what goes on behind closed doors is really everything that you see on TV happens in real life. So I've had cases where the wife was heartbroken, but then as we get into it, it turns out the husband is a cross dresser and he's on drugs. And I'm like, I think you're going to be okay. Like, we're going to get you through this divorce as calmly as possible.
mhm,
And you're going to find that you really are loving your new life on the other side, like
mm,
that sort of stuff. I've had transgender couples that come to me and they're heartbroken, but they got married as either two of the same sex or heterosexual, and then once one of them is really going through some soul searching and deciding they're going to make that huge change, then that really obviously impacts the entire relationship.
mm,
And so we can take them forward. There's no judgment, there's no blame, and we just say, hey, you guys both deserve to be your happiest healthiest selves. How can we get you there?
Mm. Now, you
Right.
expressed some concern that, you're not promoting divorce, right?
Right.
And I imagine, a lot of divorce lawyers have said that to me because I know several. And they said it's funny because we don't actually promote divorce. We're not saying, hey, you should get divorced. But their mission is if it's going to happen, let's make this as painless as
Yes.
possible. And I know you've had reservations about this in your career. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and I mean, that opens up a whole question about like your upbringing and what your idea,
Right.
right?
Yeah. I mean, I actually have been divorced myself about 8 years, a little bit longer than 8 years. And I love the idea of growing old with somebody and having that partner and working hard together to accomplish your dreams. But what I know, because I've been through it myself, is that that is not obviously always the situation. And
Mm,
50% of marriages are going to end in divorce. And since we know that that's true, that people evolve in different directions, and sometimes it's just that relationship isn't healthy anymore. That I feel like how I can really help is by picking up or supporting that struggling family who's absolutely grieving and helping them see, like, we're not going to end your family. I say this all the time, like, we're not dismantling anything that you've built or anything that is left of your relationship. In fact, I want to try and rebuild a foundation so that you can be parents and grandparents down the road
mm,
and really spare that generational trauma. That is very different than traditional divorce because they literally, by law, have to dismantle, right?
mm,
They've got to separate. But when you're working together collaboratively, it's a contract just between you and your spouse. It can be anything that you want. So it really can, like, we can decide to hold assets jointly. We can turn each other into business partners. You can be as creative as you want. And that is what I want. Like, I consider it like evolving the form of the family, not dismantling the family.
mm. But certainly in some cases, you do have to completely separate everything and dismantle.
We separate all the bank accounts, and it's you end up at the end with the exact same contract
Mhm,
that divorce ends with, nationwide. You have to enter into a settlement
mm,
agreement or a separation agreement if you're not going to have a judge decide. And so all of my cases, we create that contract, but the terms of that contract are different, and it's for each family. It's we can control the timelines, like how long is it going to be before we put a house on the market. A
mm,
court is going to say that's happening within 90 days.
mm,
That also is not very responsive to the needs of the family. Like, so
mm.
we really control all of those timelines.
That's great. So you talked a lot about assets. You did not talk about something, and that is children. What about children? We all know that also children, there's going to be a 50-50 split or, with custody and all that. Have you had some people that have not wanted to work with you because they wanted to take it to court to get like full custody?
No, and you know what is interesting? I think there's a couple things there. Most of the clients that come to me, the families that find me, they are sort of I don't know, high wealth. They have significant assets and they have a lifestyle that they're trying to preserve. And they don't have an interest in harming their spouse to the point where they want full custody.
Mm,
It is interesting. If anything, I have the opposite problem where my mom clients are like nervous that dad isn't going to be able to handle more custody.
mm,
And so but they want him to have it because so many of my female clients are just so exhausted when they come to me. Um, so that's part of the coaching that I do. Like we baby step that, and I've never had a case where a dad has not stepped up and done a whole bunch of things that he probably has not had to do during the term of their traditional marriage,
mm,
because I have found very consistently that even though, we're well into the 21st century, that within our marriages, we do sort of fall into these traditional gender roles where mom is like the secretary for the family, I call it, like
Mm-hmm.
knows. So we have to train and support dad in getting up to speed with that. It's not that he doesn't want to, it's that he never has had to
Right.
before.
That's great that they're willing to. They understand there's a change here. And I do want whatever custody I want, and I'm going to have to learn how to do that. But it's interesting that they're doing more because they've done studies on this that women still do most of the housework, even if both people have high powered jobs. If they're both
Yes.
high powered, still the mom still does way more housework.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, Jeanne, if someone said to me, like, why do people get divorced? That is why they're getting divorced, because the women are so exhausted. They are coming to me saying, if I'm going to be doing everything anyway, I can do it without being aggravated. Or
Mm,
it's, when we have a partner, we have an expectation of help.
mm,
And then we find that we're not getting it. It's that constant disappointment that
mm,
causes this low grade resentment that builds over years,
mm.
and then we get divorced. Um, so the men, I think, are always bewildered when they find out that their wife wants a divorce, because the men are working their tails off and
Mm,
doing what they think that they're supposed to be doing, and like paying all the bills, and they're great providers and coaching the teams or whatever. They don't realize, because society has like kind of set us up to fail, I think. They don't realize that their wife, their spouse wants more in terms of logistical and emotional support.
mm,
And that's why people come to me from that spot. Like,
uh-huh. So would you say that they're coming to you because the women are the ones coming to you? Because from the man's point of view, it sounds to me like you're getting more female clients, but maybe if you were a man, you'd be getting more male clients saying, I want to divorce my wife, right? You're saying
I don't think so.
so you do think it is that more women are demanding the divorce than the men these days?
I know for sure, like
Mm,
nationwide, that statistics, between 85 and 90% of divorces are initiated by women.
wow.
Um, my little theory on that too is that there's a lot of reasons why men do not want a divorce.
Mm,
And the three big ones are this fear of perceived failure,
hmm,
because if it's your spouse saying they want a divorce, men are going to internalize that failure. Like, what did they do?
mm,
Even if they can't articulate it. And then they're terrified of the financial implications, which I don't know which one is the more terrifying one. And they're terrified of losing contact with their kids,
oh, yes.
because they have this perceived, like, so much of this is that with the social consciousness, where like the old paradigm, the dads saw the kids like every other weekend on Wednesdays, Wednesdays at dinner.
Hmm.
I think a lot of people are still operating on those expectations of what divorce used to be.
Mm,
Um, they don't realize that there's a presumption of 50-50 custody. That's a big change that's actually really relatively new.
right.
So it is always women that start the process. And it's, if there's going to be a reluctant spouse, it's 90% of the time it's the husband that's the
Mm.
reluctant spouse.
Okay, so you're saying that the women are, please take them for 50% of the time, and I hope that they
Yes,
can handle it, right? And the
exactly.
men are okay with the 50%. I'm guessing there are some men that maybe don't even want the 50%.
You are correct. And so so much of softening the divorce process is literally about the vocabulary. And part of why this process works so well is because I say to them, we're not going to use the word custody. We're
Mm,
looking at creating an operating system for your family that allows you two to feel like you are keeping all the balls in the air. Dad can still work and he's got quality time with the kids. Mom is getting quality time with the kids and time alone. So it's about balancing, like, each parent getting quality time with the kids
mhm.
and each parent having time alone to heal or do what they need to do as individuals.
Right, because that is an issue. that the time that the moms often would get with the kids was not quality time. And then the
Yes,
dad would get them just for a fun weekend, and that was
exactly.
it. So that's very much changed.
Yes, it's very different.
Okay, so now I had read that about more women, but that's 95%, up to 95%.
Up to 90% of divorces are
90
initiated by women. Yeah.
unhappiness with a lot of married women in America. Well, let's just talk about America because I'm sure that other
Right.
countries have different numbers, but probably not so far off in other countries, English speaking countries. Okay, so what was your attitude growing up about marriage?
Well, I am from a big traditional Italian family, and a lot of my relatives have been married since they were 18. So I never dreamed that I would find myself divorced myself. I don't think anybody does really. But I grew up in a family of, you know, nobody is divorced, literally. I think in
Yeah.
my family, my brother kind of broke that seal. He got divorced first. And I remember when I told my mother I was getting divorced, she made it immediately about her. She looked at me and she said, "Who has 100% of their kids get divorced?" Because there's three of us in my immediate family, and I was the like golden child who was married 15 years, going strong. And then, no, I said
Oh.
I was getting divorced too.
So all three are divorced.
My brother and sister are happily remarried for a long time now. I'm the only one who's still not
Mm.
remarried. But
No, I totally
yes,
understand because I am the only divorced person in my family. It's not our culture, and it's not like I'm
right,
pro-divorce. And I don't think
right,
anybody is pro-divorce, and that's not what this is
right.
about. This is like if it's going to happen because it has to happen, you might as well make it as friendly as possible and as painless. So I think you have a very good service here, and it sounds like you're also coaching people on the transition as well.
Yes, that's a big part of why it works also. And so when I created this business, I took like all of my experience from actually like being on the ground in the courthouse,
Mm.
everything I'd learned from those negotiations, but also everything I'd learned from my marriage therapist friends, all of the psychology and neuropsychology that I'd learned about habit forming, habit breaking, and why getting divorced feels so horrible,
Mm.
besides the obvious grief. It's also, when you think about, we have been married our entire adult lives. Many of my clients are married 30 and even 40 plus years.
Mm.
They have been neurologically married literally to their spouse.
Mhm.
So it feels incredibly uncomfortable to start trying to figure out what it is to be an individual again. And so this program really takes couples right from the initial decision to separate
Mm.
and helps them weather the emotional roller coaster that is inevitable, but we can kind of smooth it dramatically.
Mm. Well, there's studies that people that either lose their spouse from death or get divorced cannot function because they're so used to working as a team. So literally it is
Yes.
the other half. It's this
Yes.
other part that was working and functioning. So you've got to teach them to function differently and to
Yes.
to work that. That's it's not easy. I know. And it's not like, you know, it's hard. You and I have been through that. Okay, so what would you
Yes.
say to people? I'm guessing that you want to really make sure when you're working with people that they should get divorced. So do you sort of make sure or say, hey, have you been to counseling? Have you tried everything before you proceed?
Yeah. Um, there's a couple things that people say to me that makes me know it's time, and you might be able to relate to this. So often I hear there's like a specific moment in time where they'll describe it as a switch went off, or I woke up, this happened, he said this to me, and I knew I could never go back.
Mm,
When they say something like that to me, I know that it's absolutely time for them to move forward.
mm,
And I will tell them that. If they come to me and they say, he's been working really hard and we've been having some good times, and he said he's willing to go to counseling, then I will say, it might be too soon for you to make this decision.
mm,
If if you're seeing him making that effort now,
Mhm.
and it's not like the fifth time you've been through this cycle, that's the
Mm.
other piece of
Mhm.
it. But if this seems new, then you don't want to be bringing me into the picture yet.
Mm.
You want to watch this and then call me in 6 months or a year, and
Mm.
if you need to.
Right. Okay, good. Yeah, because, some marriages can be saved. And one of my clients saves marriages where people were done. They'd
Yeah,
moved out and they'd done, and she is like magical and saves marriages. But this would be in case somebody like her couldn't do that, right?
right.
And in case, I
Exactly.
mean, I think it's also really important that if the husband isn't even aware, that then both of them are not communicating properly,
Right.
right? So the first thing is get people communicating and see if it's
Yes.
unfixable. But I feel like if somebody doesn't even know there's a problem, it's kind of unfair, right? Well,
It's those
okay,
unmet expectations, right?
right.
That's what I say. I could save marriages. I should talk to her because I think if they brought me into like pre-Cana courses
Hmm.
and other like religious programs where they make the kids go through,
Hmm.
I could prevent divorce by telling them at the beginning what I know now.
Maybe you should do that.
Right. I was going to say that'll be my next offering because it's about years of unmet, unspoken expectations.
Mm,
And that is part of why it's so sad at the end because um, if it's been going on for years, the woman can't, it's really very rare for a woman to be able to open her heart up again if
mm,
she's decided that it's shut down.
mm,
And that is what leaves the husband heartbroken because angry because of
mm,
the injustice of that. Like he
mm.
didn't even know. There's not even a chance now for him to go back and save this because
Yeah.
he didn't say.
But certainly there's couples that are arguing about these things nonstop, and it's not a mystery. That is not there. That's one case. But when I'm thinking about it, there are lots of people that argue over and over, and they're just ignoring the arguments.
And that's what I hear. Like when the husband says, I had no idea, the wife almost 100% of the time says, that's the problem. He had no idea, but he should have known because I've been saying it for 5
Been
years,
nagging him.
you know?
Okay, well, so this is a very sensitive subject, and again, I don't even believe in divorce, and I'm divorced. So where does that leave
Me,
us,
exactly.
right? Yeah. However, it sounds like you're helping them to save time, money, and also make it more civil and not a destructive war, right? Like that movie War of the Roses. That
Exactly.
was awful. So, well, thank you
Yes.
so much for turning up. What can you give people as advice if they're what's the advice before they seek help?
Yeah, before if you are contemplating divorce, like my biggest most important piece of advice is to have a kind conversation with your spouse about it. You never go in and never blurt it out as part of an argument like that's it, we're getting divorced. You have to really approach them from a place of compassion and really sadness for what you're both feeling and just say, hey, I know you're not happy or you could be happier because I'm not giving you what you need. If the wife wants a divorce, I can guarantee the husband that he's not being treated the way he deserves to be treated
Mm,
either, right?
mm,
So, but if you say to your spouse, it's time for us to figure out our next steps so that we can be great grandparents and healthy moving forward, that is a conversation that you can have calmly.
mm,
And you're not threatening anyone with divorce
mm,
because if you say that, they've got this vision of you're blowing up their entire life.
mm,
You really don't want to do that. You want to mean it when you say, we need to figure out our next steps together
mm,
and not threaten um, to really throw that first shot across the bow by hiring a lawyer or going out and
mm.
filing paperwork.
Right. Okay, great advice. All right, well, Regina, thank you so much for turning up. If you want to hear more about getting in touch with Regina, we have all the links in the show notes. And just why don't you just say your website address for people that are listening?
Yeah. Thank you. So you can find me. It's Family Transitions, Divorce Coaching and Mediation. And the website is ftdivorcecoaching.com for
Perfect.
family transitions. So
Okay,
you can schedule a call right through there.
great. Okay, thank you so much for turning up. I hope this was helpful to many people, because we do know that is 50% of people that are not happy. But again, try to save the marriage before you go start hiring people. Okay, that's my advice. All right.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Thank you so much. I hope that this was helpful, and we'll see you on the next episode. You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Omlor, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Omlor International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact.